Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Aleksander Czeszkiewicz. First, a couple of announcements. Check out our new affiliate, Brainsupreme. Brainsupreme contains the highest quality ingredients to start your microdosing journey guaranteed. Visit their website, brainsupreme.co. If you visit brainsupreme.co/discount/FKN15, you'll get 15% your entire order. That link is right in the description. And you can also watch my recent episode with Brainsupreme founder Adam Michel to find out more about starting your microdose journey today. Also, great ways to help support Forbidden Knowledge News. Watch the Forbidden documentary, Occult Louisiana, available on Tubi and multiple streaming platforms. You can get a Rokfin premium membership at rokfin.com/FKN+. Get access to all our premium content and all the premium content from every creator on Rokfin. Finally, we are booking guests for October and November. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me, forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome back to the show Aleksander Czeszkiewicz. He was always a great student, but he suddenly started to question reality, especially our oldest history, which led him to write his book, Deja Vu, Has Everything Already Been? At the age of 17. He came to the conclusion that our ancient ancestors were telling a completely different story about our oldest history. Aleksander, welcome back. How you doing?
Hello and welcome again. I'm fine. And you?
I am wonderful, man. I'm looking forward to this. Always a great discussion, and you're working on a new book that's going to be out soon, Lost Knowledge of the Ancients. It's going to cover many of our favorite topics here, such as how the ancients understood consciousness and metaphysics. We're going to get into a little bit of Gnosticism and Hermetic understandings, as well as what we've become in our modern age and where we may be headed collectively. Lots to get into, but before we do, remind the audience just a little bit about yourself and your work.
Hello everyone, my name is Aleksander Czeszkiewicz and I'm a researcher and author from Poland. I wrote my first book here, Deja Vu Has Everything Already Been, which I highly recommend everyone reading, just at the age of 17. So at a very young age, and I'm continuing my journey. As you mentioned, this year I'm publishing my second book about the lost knowledge of the ancient, first in Polish, so then probably the beginning of the next year translating it into English. And I'm mostly interested in the biggest actually mysteries of the universe, including, as you mentioned, ancient philosophies, consciousness, workings of the universe, science, physics, metaphysics, and of course the lost history of humanity. And I started in my first book with the topic of the lost history, lost episode from our most distant past. And now I am continuing on the journey to the lost knowledge of the ancients, the workings of the universe, how our reality works, and many more.
Excellent, excellent. Well, where should we start with such a big topic of how the ancients understood consciousness and metaphysics and implemented this knowledge in their daily lives? Where should we start?
I think we should start from the beginning, from the foundation and how we nowadays understand our reality, consciousness, and everything. Because the way the most people understand the world and the way the media understands the world, the way science understands the world, it all shapes our beliefs and our views on the reality. So I think we should start from the foundation, mostly from how the modern science works, and then we can join more knowledge about that. So I think we should start with the current worldview about the universe, about human consciousness, about everything. And we know that science has the biggest monopoly on knowledge in our current times. And many people believe that science is the most objective view of our reality, that science is trying to tell us the truth, the most objective truths about our reality. But actually, it isn't how science works, because in the past, science was everything, every attempt of humans to understand our reality and to gain knowledge. This was science, this has been science for many, many years. But nowadays, science is much more strict, and science has plenty of different assumptions, so criteria, in order for our attempt to understand reality to be considered science. So it isn't, oh, I will go outside, do some measurements, do anything, and this would be called science. It would be called science in the past, but nowadays, in order for something to be scientific, it needs to meet certain criteria. And I think that it is really strange, because if I wanted to know the truth, if I wanted to discover the truth about the surrounding me reality, I wouldn't limit myself to certain assumptions, to certain criteria. You know what I mean? The truth is out there, the truth is objective, the truth just is. So why science is limiting itself to having met certain criteria and certain assumptions? And actually, if we delve deep into those assumptions, we will see that many of them may not be true at all. So if those assumptions are not true, how can we speak that science wants to discover the truth? Science actually does not want to discover the truth itself. And some of those criteria, some of those basic assumptions of science are, for instance, rationalism, that everything that we measure and everything in our universe is rational. So we can actually make it rational, so we can understand it logically and understand it with our own minds. So nothing is outside of the scope of human understanding, of human logical thinking. And I wonder to myself, we know very well that we are similar to other creatures on our planet, and we know that probably there was some kind of evolution that happened in our past. I wonder to myself, was it really an evolutionary adaptation for us to be able to know the entire universe? I think not, and we see that plenty of the survival adaptations that we have and that other species have are actually distorting the reality in order for us to survive. Some things are more desired by some animals or by us humans, and some not. And this isn't that it is objective to desire it, but often these things are illusionary. Affection, love, lust, etc. And there are many others, like hunger, if we are not hungry but we haven't eaten specific foods. So I am thinking to myself, is it really that the adaptation of our organisms enabled us to understand the entire universe? I think not, and I think that there may be certain things in our universe that are beyond rationalism, that are beyond our thinking minds. And this is one of the main assumptions of science. If you are irrational, then you are not scientific. That's why plenty of theories which involve esoterics, metaphysics, are actually not denoted as scientific and are often called pseudoscience or parascience and stuff like that. But this is only one assumption, and in order for some theory, for example, to be scientific, it also needs to meet other criteria, like, for instance, naturalism. And naturalism means that all natural causes, so all natural phenomena that appear and that happen in our universe, have natural sources or natural explanations. So just clearly there is nothing supernatural in our universe. So everything, every law of the universe, every law of physics, everything that happens, for instance, now something falls down, etc., all sources of those movements and stuff that happen in our reality are only natural causes. But I think to myself, what if it isn't true, just like the rationalism? You know, maybe there are some metaphysical causes, maybe there are some spiritual causes, as plenty of people nowadays in spiritual believe and actually experience. So if this was the case, and if it was the case that not everything is rational and logical, then science would actually fall apart. And actually it may be the case that these are the biggest smoking guns and the biggest mistakes and the biggest weak points of the modern science. And as I mentioned, if I wanted to gather knowledge about the universe or discover the truth about the universe, I wouldn't limit myself, oh, everything that I will discover needs to be logical, needs to be rational. Maybe some things wouldn't be rational, or maybe some things wouldn't be natural, maybe they would be supernatural. And I think that these, especially those two criteria, those two main assumptions of science, were created because of the overconfidence of science during the last few hundred years, because we were coming out of the Middle Ages, Dark Ages, in which there were plenty of superstitions that some divine beings were manipulating everything in our reality, and then science was showing people that no, this is just a superstition, this is just a manipulation, and here is the proof that those things, for example, changes in the weather, are not demonic or are not angelic, but actually the weather is caused by some natural phenomena. And science started accumulating more and more data, and I think that it became overconfident in the meaning that, okay, if so many superstitions were debunked by us, so there isn't anything supernatural. Everything is just matter, everything is just biology, everything is just nature, there isn't anything more to that. And that would lead me, you asked me on the email to elaborate on the conspiracy throughout the ages. And I think that it is a part of the conspiracy, because what is the next step? Is science, if science is so confident that there is nothing supernatural, that everything is just nature, all causes are natural, there is only matter and everything is logical, then the next assumption and the next step is atheism. Is actually having no sense in the universe because everything is natural. The Big Bang just happened randomly. Everything is random. We are just biological machines, and all the evolution is just selfish in order to get the genes and procreate and create more and more, etc. And I think that it is coming to a bigger and bigger limitation. And why I am starting with that, which may be a different topic than you mentioned, Hermeticism, Gnosticism, lost knowledge of the ancients. I mentioned that because the past was completely different. And as I was researching on my first book, actually, Deja Vu Has Everything Already Been, plenty of people all around the world were telling us that, for instance, in the very, very distant past, there was a different age of supernatural humans, in which humanity was so awakened, was so spiritual, that humans were able to manipulate reality using non-physical sources, forces, and powers. Were so spiritual that they were able to have supernatural powers. And these kinds of stories are found all around the world. For instance, in the Yuga tradition, found in actually one of the oldest sources, oldest texts from all times, the Mahabharata. In Mahabharata, there are mentioned the yugas, so the cycles of time. And according to the Hindu, there are 4 cycles of time. One is the golden age, full of spirituality and supernatural powers, full of ascetics, because you do not need to fight in the physical world, because you actually have everything in your spirit and you can manifest everything effortlessly. This is the Krita, or sometimes called Satya Yuga. And then from one age to the other, all that spirituality is decreased by 1/4, and then in the 4th age, the Kali Yuga, the darkest of ages, humanity is immersed in the physical realm and is only a quarter into the spirituality. So let's say has only quarter of the overall potential of the overall spirituality that we are capable of. So it reminded me of what I've just talked to you about the science, that we are gradually coming into this materialistic, atheistic, nonsensical view that everything is just random, we are just biological machines, maybe we shouldn't be that emotional and spiritual, just use cold logic and build all of these concrete walls instead of beautiful buildings that we used to. So it reminds me of a conspiracy that may be ongoing through the ages or through the even millennia, that is coming to decrease and decrease the spirituality and the power of humans. And then the last step would be, I think, transhumanism, in which we are so much immersed into the physical realm because in the transhumanic agenda, we are partially machines, partially nanotechnology, etc. So then, if we are more and more physical because of the technology and all of the cyborg bodies, etc., then we have less and less of our nature and of our true power of spirituality.
Do you think that this has been a natural progression and evolution of humanity to progress towards these technological materialistic understandings, or has there been an infiltration and diversion of the direction that our consciousness was naturally headed to have these understandings of energy and nature and how our consciousness is connected, as opposed to relying on technology and these material factors to survive in this world?
I think that it is partially natural. So our nature is cyclical. This is another very key belief and a part of the lost knowledge of the ancients, that everything is cyclical. There are seasons, just as there is winter, summer, spring, etc. So the same with the spirituality, the same with the evolution of consciousness. And I think, and I will add to that later, it may be connected to all of the theories that we live in the simulation, matrix, etc. And then we'll come back to the Gnosticism and Hermeticism, which may be the key to understanding this. But I think this is a key question that you've asked me, because those yugas, as I mentioned, there are 4 ages, and from one age to the other, there is a quarter of spirituality less. So in the golden age, there is 100%, and it is often called Dharma. Everyone knows about karma, but not everyone knows about Dharma. And Dharma, there are plenty of different, in my opinion, false, and there are plenty of misconceptions nowadays in spirituality with all those gurus about Dharma. But according to Mahabharata, which, as I mentioned, is one of the oldest sources speaking on that, Dharma is that which is right. It is similar to the Japanese concept of ikigai, but ikigai is often in business and self-development the best thing for you to do, which is the most valuable to you, the thing that you can do the best, that you are good at, and that people want from you. Like the best thing for you to do. In Polish, it is often called racja stanu, the thing that is crucial now, like crucial decision. We are, for instance, in some kind of political situation and we don't know what to do. But at every point in our personal life or in the bigger community life, there is one kind of decision, not maybe single decision, but one route to take, which would be good, which would be beneficial to everyone, which would be the best. So Dharma is this which is right, which is completely opposite of the modern, as I mentioned, logical supremacy that, oh, what should I do? I will give all the benefits or that, all the benefits of that, and all the pros and cons, and I will just logically, judge which is the right decision. But actually our ancient ancestors were saying that there is thing that is right to do. Sometimes we feel that we have an intuitive glimpse that maybe we should take this route. Maybe this route will be beneficial. So this is Dharma, this which is right. And I think that, this conspiracy going on for the ages, it was used in ancient India in order to gain power, because this was just a concept. For instance, I am good at this, for instance, writing, people like my writing, etc. Therefore, this is my dharma to do that. So this is just, the best thing. But then it was used in the caste system to denote that, oh, you were born a slave, then it is the best thing for you to do, to be the slave, and you cannot graduate from that. It is connected to karma because maybe in the previous incarnations you had negative karma, etc. Now you have to be a slave. So I think that, in the very past, but it is cyclical, as I mentioned, people were full of spirituality. Then it was decreasing, maybe as the Yuga says, that by quarter, by quarter, by quarter. And it was decreasing. And firstly, it was used by religious gurus, by some sects, and other spiritual gurus and sects to limit humans, but still within the realm of spiritual power, that you have power, but you are limited. Like the religious dogmas, that you may be powerful spiritual being, but this is what our dogma, religious dogma, Christian, Buddhic, or everything says. It was the first limitation. And then there was this limitation that I mentioned at the beginning about the materialism. So first we decreased your spiritual powers by using dogmas and religions, and then now we are striping you away from that because you're just a biological machine, and everyone used to be wrong, everyone believed in superstitions, etc. So it was a gradual decreasing of this dharma, so this which is right. And this dharma, in my opinion and from my research, I spoke about it a lot during recent conversations also with others here in Poland, and I think that this dharma is what we sometimes experience as flow. Maybe you also experience a flow state. Plenty of people experience a flow state in which you're just in flow, just like water, and you're effortlessly, with minimum effort, with minimum amount of time, doing things that look incredible, like supernatural. And I think this is what this Dharma, what is right, is. And now the agenda of all this rationalism, of all, I would say, even logical and rational pride, that we are just prideful about how logical we are and how our ancient ancestors or medieval ancestors were so stupid and ignorant of all the logic and all of everything. They believed in superstitions, in some angels, in some hell and heaven. You know what I mean? It is a rational, and it is a pride of our mind. And this is the current agenda, to do that in order to cut us out of the natural flow of events of nature, to cut us from our spirituality, or we may even call to cut us from the source. But I think it is both an agenda. Some people are using it, just in the past some people used that in those religions, sects and dogmas, but I also think that it is like a challenge. As I mentioned, that we will be speaking a little bit about the matrix or simulation. Imagine a game. One level is easy in order for you to understand the basics, and then some levels are harder. There are some challenges to do. So I think that this Kali Yuga, and this is actually, in my opinion, an optimistic and hopeful view of spirituality and cyclical nature of spirituality, because in Mahabharata, there is a mention that it isn't that one age is the worst, like Kali Yuga, everything is bad, but this is just the nature of this age. And I think that Mahabharata, the description of yugas, is some kind of instructions of how we should live on earth, because there are mentions of what would be beneficial for us if we happen to be in Kali Yuga, if we happen to incarnate in Kali Yuga or another Yuga. There's a mention that maybe you should focus on that, and in one age you should be giving, like giving people, not be selfish. In other age you should be focused on knowledge, and in other age you should be focused on aesthetics and spirituality. So it isn't that one age is worse than other, but that there are challenges and there are different seasons. Like, how can we compare if winter is worse than summer? Maybe it is from some kind of view, but from the other it isn't. These are just different nature and different seasons.
That makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about how our ancient ancestors understood consciousness, metaphysics, and most likely had an understanding of scientific principles that worked with our consciousness and the natural etheric energies we had.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I totally agree that our ancient ancestors had an amazing view and an amazing knowledge on those topics. Maybe they used to be a little bit superstitious about the natural phenomena, but when it comes, for instance, to the workings of the minds, when it comes to our minds in the West, we live both in the Western world. We think, when it comes to the components of the mind, we think, oh, there is logical thinking, like analytical thinking, and maybe there is some kind of imagination. But we do not say that there are any different parts of our minds, just imagination and logical thinking. But for instance, in ancient India, it was divided into many, many more branches. There was one kind of component of the mind, the other. It was much more systematized, and it was, as you mentioned, scientific, because science also does that it takes the bigger picture and it describes the smaller parts and it divides the smaller parts. But it is also very interesting because the consciousness and the understanding of our ancient ancestors about the consciousness is connected to this agenda and to a conspiracy theory that we mentioned, that there is a huge conspiracy from the beginnings of time, like from for many last thousands of years, because the ancient understanding of consciousness, mind, and how our reality works was in complete reverse than the modern one. And you know what is also in complete reverse to anything? Satanism. And I think that Satanism and the basic symbols of Satanism are reversed, like the reversed Christian cross or the reversed pentagram. Like pentagram in many beliefs was a positive symbol, but we know from culture that reversed is satanic, is bad. The same with the Christian. The Christian cross is just a symbol, maybe negative because Jesus died at the cross according to this vision, so I won't judge. But again, reversing everything. And I think that it is the same about the our modern understanding of reality is this in complete reverse, because nowadays, according to the scientific worldview, mind comes from matter. So there are just random particles. Those random particles were created during the Big Bang, then they accumulated into planets, suns, etc. And now, at some point during billions of years of evolution, they created life and then human beings that finally are capable of having mind and of thinking. So the modern view is that matter created mind, and that mind evolves from matter. But in many ancient cultures all around the world, it was in complete reverse, that mind creates matter, that there was first consciousness, mind, thought, whatever, and then it thought and it created, materialized the modern world. It was just like I can code some kind of game or software and then it will materialize out of my thoughts, out of my code. The same here. And I think that the best example of that, and it is best described by Plato, because Plato thought, if I can imagine a circle, every one of us can imagine a circle. But if I draw a circle on anything, or if I create a circle out of matter, out of pebbles, or out of sand, etc., this circle would never be an ideal and perfect circle. It will always be a little bit rough, it will always be a little bit asymmetrical, it will never be perfect. The same like on our desktops or on our screens. We are watching each other, we may in Paint create a circle, but if we zoom enough, we will see that these are just pixels and that this isn't a perfect curved circle, but that this circle is made out of pixels that are rectangular. So Plato thought that our material reality is never perfect, it's never ideal, there is nothing ideal in this reality. However, he made an imaginary experiment. He thought and he imagined a circle or a ball. And he thought to himself that my mind, his mind, can actually create an ideal circle. Because you can think of an ideal circle, and just as on desktop or in the matter, you can zoom in your mind, in your imagination, and in your imagination, this circle can be perfect. Every time you can create everything perfect. So Plato thought that first, there is a form or an idea. It is often called forms or ideas, like my imaginary circle. And then matter must be a derivative of that form or idea. And he thought to himself that our reality looks like some kind of God, anything, kind of thoughts, that there is a form of, for instance, a cow or a horse, and then that this data and this form, this idea is materialized into matter, and that matter isn't perfect, and then it must be a derivative of something else, some kind of ideal, perfect, either idea or form. And I think that it is both logical and that it could be the case that this is how our reality works. And we see more and more, even physics at more and more deep atomic and subatomic levels, see that there is, for instance, at those levels, no symmetry. They thought that all of those subatomic particles would be symmetrical or behave in that way, but actually there isn't any symmetry in them. And we see that this world isn't perfect. So this is the reverse understanding, that according to the ancients, not only Plato, I here mentioned Plato because he made the greatest thought experiment on this topic I could ever imagine. But plenty of other beliefs, ancient beliefs of our ancestors were similar to that. Even in Christianity, in I think John, there is a mention that at the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, etc. But this word is the Greek logos, and logos actually in Greek means word, but it also means mind, it also means thought, it also means rational thinking. So maybe at the beginning was the logos, so maybe at the beginning was the thought, was the idea of that. And this is the case. And actually, this view is called idealism, from this Platonic idea. And it is in complete opposition from materialism, because materialism is in nature of modern science and of modern world, that everything is matter and its interactions. So, of course, forces and fields are included, but there isn't anything spiritual like souls, God, metaphysical realms, hell, etc. So this is materialism. And I mentioned at the beginning that one of the bases of science is naturalism, but actually naturalism and materialism are almost the same. There are a few distinctions, but they're almost the same. So materialism lies in the nature of science. And according to our ancient ancestors, it was in the reverse, it was the idealism. Idealism was also applied to ancient Hindu thought, in which the Brahman, the consciousness, created everything, the universe. But also it was before Plato, it was before the Bible, because for instance in ancient Egypt there is a creation out of atom, and atom actually created, it is also according to religious studies actually named creation out of logos, just as in the case of Plato and just as in the case in the New Testament book of John, that according to this version, because there are a few versions in ancient Egypt, because it was more than 3,000 years of their existence, and different, places in ancient Egypt had different beliefs, but one of the main was actually in the belief of atom, and atom first thought and then spelled the word into existence. So again, we've got the word like in the Bible, but here it is more in depth. It isn't just a word, but it is thought and then the word. Just as in the Hindu system, there is first the Brahman, the consciousness, and there is the first Om, A-U-M, which is a sound, a mantra. So just as in Egypt there is thought of the god, and atom, interestingly, just as Osiris, Horus are different personified beings, atom was actually couldn't be described by them. They say that you cannot describe atom, he is just formless, he is what was at the beginning. They weren't that stupid to say, oh, there was some kind of God the Father, like you and me, similar being who created the world. They knew that before that they should have been something non-material and should be something different. So just as in Egypt was atom, who couldn't be described, couldn't be seen because he was formless, he had a thought and then created out of speech the universe. So in Hindu there was Brahman, the consciousness, universal, everything, who during the the vibration created the universe. And similar to the New Testament, at the beginning was the logos. So again, either word or thought or a combination of both.
What are your thoughts on the ancients' understanding of the cosmos, astrology, how they could use the stars and read the stars and apply it to instances in their everyday lives?
This is another great question, because I often compare astrology to the previous mentioned cyclical time of yugas, for example, but also to the Mayan calendar. And this is a great topic because, just as I mentioned, that yugas, those cycles of time, are not only on some one scale that, oh, this yuga lasts for this thousands of years, but those yugas are on a bigger scale and on the minor scale. Just as we can say that, oh, there is a cycle of 10 days, but then it goes bigger, like we have a circle and we have a part of the circle. Here it may be at the beginning of the circle 10 days, but this same cycle goes for 10 years, for instance, or 1 year or something. So there are cycles within the cycles. It isn't that there's one cycle and we are okay. There are cycles within the cycles, and there are plenty of them, and understanding of them is actually lost knowledge of the ancients and those instructions manual of how we should live on earth. Because just as I mentioned to you guys, during this period you should be doing that, or it isn't that you should. It is that the best thing, this dharma, this thing that is right, is to do those kind of activities. Doing this, it is the other. And I think that the same is with the astrology, and that the modern view, there are plenty of views, of course, on astrology. One is that it is complete BS, and the other is that, you know, we should trust the horoscopes, analyze everything, and we should be we are a little bit powerless to those astrological phenomena, that we do not have that much power, that we should know the astrology because there may be a bad period in our life, or maybe there is a period of destruction or creation, etc. And I think that astrology is another kind of system of how to live on Earth. For instance, if you know your astrological type, and some astrologics are more defined or some not. For instance, we've got in the Western Hemisphere and nowadays the most common 12 signs of the zodiac, but in Hindu or Sumerian astrology there were plenty of more, but it doesn't eliminate each other. One is more defined, one is more specific about the details of those periods, and one is not. For instance, Mayans have a similar concept like astrology, and there are plenty of intermingling circles, and actually they thought that it is the best way to put astrology, just as we think, oh, this is the Taurus era, or oh, this is the era of the Scorpio, etc., like season of those zodiac signs. They thought every day is different, and every day has different energies, and we should know about all the cycles, the biggest of which is, of course, the precession of the equinoxes, the famous 2012, the catastrophe, the ending of one period, one sun, and the beginning of the next. This is one cycle of 5 times 5,125 years, but there are bigger cycles lasting millions of years, and there are smaller cycles lasting 100 days, or even 40 days, or even 7 days, just as we divide our year into days and weeks and months. So it is the same with astrology and Mayan calendar. But it is a little bit like an instruction. It isn't, in my opinion, astrology isn't about limitation. Just because someone is a fire sign, it doesn't mean that they are some kind of victims of these traits that fire person can have. But I think it is like a challenge, as I mentioned before. For instance, there are plenty of video games, and the most fun ones and the most common ones have a different kind, for instance, skills that you can upgrade your character. You can be more charismatic, you can be stronger, you can be faster, etc. You have different points on different scales. You would never want a perfect ideal character because it would be boring, it would be too easy. You always need some kind of challenge limitation in games, because, you know, if you get all the cheats and all of the possibilities in a game, it is boring. And I think it is the same with the astrology yugas and the Mayan calendar, that it is a lost knowledge, because nowadays we do not trust this knowledge, or we are limited by that. But according to our ancient ancestors, it was crucial in order for us to understand the flow of life. What season are we in? Because maybe in one season it is good to start a job or a business, but in other maybe it is a bad time to do that. Maybe in one time it is good to invest, but in other there is a bad time to invest, or to do any other stuff that comes with our lives. And I think that all of those systems are this kind of instructions, both at the level of I am in this season of my life, and from my experience, I sometimes feel that it isn't good to do that or to go in that direction, but I feel that maybe in 3 months' time it will be good to go in that direction. And then I see that something happened on a bigger scale, and oh, it was good that I didn't make that decision, because it would fail either way, and now I can start 2 months later, and now I can succeed in that. And I think it is about that, about knowledge of the seasons that are now suppressed by this ideology of Satanism, of materialism, atheism, of this rational pride, I would say even satanic pride, because I will go into that later, but the allegory and the metaphor of Satan in our Western world is about the rational, egoistic pride. And I think that modern world and those satanic symbols that appear everywhere in media, on concerts, etc., these satanic symbols are their way, those elites or of those initiates or those people who know about that. their way of portraying that we are going into that direction, that we are going into this egoistical pride, and in this egoistical pride of the superiority of our logical egoistic brain, we may say, oh, I don't care about the seasons because according to the biggest evidence, scientific journals, etc., these seasons do not exist and everything is random. So we're going into that direction, and this knowledge of the seasons is suppressed. But the other way is to connect that with matrix and simulation, which is the most prevalent, of course, in the East, in the belief of the Hindu Maya that our reality is just an illusion and this is some kind of game of spiritual advancement. I think that these astrological and cyclical time concepts also apply to our incarnation, because maybe there is no reincarnation. I don't know, I haven't experienced my previous lifetimes, but we appear on that planet, so there is at least some kind of incarnation that we sometimes suddenly appear to be in this reality. And I think that it may be connected to those kinds of ideas like astrology, that okay, my character, my incarnation, like my game, my level in this life is to do that and that because I was born in this. Maybe before that, like maybe I want to play an action game, like a shooter or something, and I want to be some kind of hero. So my traits at the beginning of that game, like during our birth, would be to have those traits and those characteristics. Some other person maybe want a slow life, just to have a family, just to have a house, etc. So he will have other characteristics. So it is both, this knowledge is both connected to the way we appear in this life and the way we appear in this simulation matrix, etc. And also when we actually are in it, to understand that there are things that are right at those times, that everything is relative and everything changes, everything is in flow.
You mentioned the cycle that we're in, how it's headed towards a very materialistic age, and there's different understandings of where we're at, what cycle we're actually in. Some believe that we've been in that materialistic age for a very long time, and we may be at the rock bottom of it. Some believe we're starting to go on the upswing. What are your thoughts?
There are, as you mentioned, plenty of different ideas and theories on that, and one with which I am most keen to agree with is based on the Yugas, but also on works of a few mystics like Sri Yukteswar, who was the master of the famous Paramahansa Yogananda, the author of Autobiography of the Yogi. And based on his ideas and the ancient Yugas, in connection with that, it would be that now we are going up. So there are, as I mentioned, in the Yuga system for ages, one is Satya Krita Yuga, the greatest age, the most spirituality. It is also the longest one. Then there is the Treta Yuga, which is the age of knowledge, in which there is 75% of the spirituality, but again, 25% it starts to be more material. And then there is a Dvapara Yuga, which is called an energetic fast age, because, if it is 50-50, it is like a union of masculine and feminine. It is really intense because there are both opposites in 50-50 about percent rate. So there is 50% of Dharma and 50% of Adharma. So this is a very, very fast age. And then there is this Kali Yuga, in which there is only a quarter of spirituality. There is the biggest immersion into matter, etc. And according to this theory, I think it was, as I mentioned, Sri Yukteswar, Yugas Plus. It is, I think, Joseph Selby, the author of a book about that. And it was, as I mentioned before, Sri Yukteswar, but he described it very well. We would be going up from the Kali Yuga, which would peak in the Middle Ages. And in the Middle Ages, it was really, really dark. There were epidemics, people were dying. It was really, dark. People were in superstition, in control, plenty of death. And now we are in this Dvapara Yuga, so this energetic age, 50-50. And we are in that from about 1800s, but there are always a few hundred years of transition periods in the Yuga. Even in Mahabharata, the oldest source, there is a mention that there is either 100 or 300 year transition period from those Yugas. So we would be in this energetic age from about 1800, maybe beginning of the 1900s. So I think it is okay, energetic age, and most of the energy, like nuclear energy, like electricity, appeared at that age. And we we started having an extremely fast growth because, the world 300 years ago was completely different from nowadays. And it was an exponential growth. It wasn't just growth, just steady growth. It was an exponential growth to all the technology. So I would agree that we may be at this point. So we aren't in the rock bottom, and the rock bottom would be at the worst periods of the Middle Ages, which was actually one of the worst periods, at least in our Western hemisphere, especially in Europe, but also in other regions, it wasn't the best period to be alive. So now we would be in this energy. We are just starting because these ages last for at least, the Kali Yuga is the shortest, but I think Dvapara Yuga lasts for more than 2000 years. So we are just at the beginning of that. And I think it would also be connected with the rise of modern spirituality, New Age, all of different religions that were created, cults, all of this merging together different religious and spiritual beliefs.
Let's get deeper into the understandings of the nature of our reality. You mentioned the matrix, simulation theory. It would be advantageous to go and look at the ancients' understanding of the nature of reality, especially the Gnostic view. There's many that in our modern age that believe we are trapped in some sort of simulated reality. Let's get into the ancients' understanding of the true nature of our reality.
Yes, I think that, and it may offend many people, the ancient view of reality is that it is a kind of game. That's why I often in this conversation mention that it is like a playable character, and it is like playing a video game, because let's start with those that we mentioned. The Hindu, the most ancient view that Brahman, the consciousness, created the universe out of Om, and now we are in some kind of Maya, which is, the Maya is actually an illusion, but it is mostly an illusion of our minds and senses. So as we incarnate, as we are in our bodies, we do not see the reality as it is because it is made of some particles or some other phenomena. We see the reality and we perceive the reality just as our senses perceive. We do not see all of the electromagnetic spectrum. We know very well that we do not hear every sound, but it is not only like that. We see those colors, we do not see other colors, and it is just a survival adaptation in order for us to survive, which comes back to the first mention of mine about science, that I think that if we are so much limited by our own senses, why we should be able to discover with our own minds the entire truth about the reality? This is one of the biggest weaknesses of the rational view, that everything is rational and that we can comprehend everything. And we see plenty of evidence that oppose that view. And I compare often this, I mentioned those yugas and those instructions. It would be like a game, different yugas, different cycles, incarnating during different cycles would be different challenges, different levels. I want to experience as a soul or some kind of spiritual being, I want to experience that kind of world, so I incarnate here in this period. I want something else, I incarnate in different period. And the whole system of reincarnation and those yugas, and if we connect that with the spiritual awakening, that we are in this illusion and that we need to have some spiritual practices in order to go beyond the veil, beyond the illusion of the reality, in my opinion, it's similar to a video game. But you mentioned Gnostics, and you mentioned also another key question was that we are a little bit imprisoned in our reality, like the conspiracy theories that the Earth is a total prison. And I often call Gnostics the ancient conspiracy theorists, because most of the modern conspiracy theories, like the Earth is a prison, that we are imprisoned here, and many more, actually originated about 2000 years ago with the Gnostics. The same, I was shocked, and it was after the release of my book Deja Vu Has Everything Already Been, in which I talk about the lost civilizations that may have been destroyed by the Great Flood that is mentioned in many areas of the world. But actually Gnostics were creating conspiracy theories on the same topic.
All right. Apparently, the Archons were not happy with this conversation, but we're going to pick up where we left off. You were discussing the Gnostic understandings of nature of reality.
Yes, the Matrix has attacked us because we're uncovering how it works and where are the glitches and how to survive and win the game of Earth. Yes, I will start with the Gnostics because plenty of modern conspiracy theories, not to be offensive, but just to classify as theories which involve some kind of conspiracy, like that we are imprisoned on Earth, like our souls are imprisoned, Earth is a prison, or I mentioned my own stuff that I wrote in my first book, Deja Vu, has everything already been about lost civilizations that may have been destroyed by phenomena like the Great Flood. Gnostics were actually the ancient conspiracy theorists because they created those theories about 2000 years ago, and they were both speculating on the idea that we are imprisoned here in material bodies and that Earth is a prison, but also they were creating different theories about the flood and about the intentions of the gods, because the Gnostics were famous for their idea that the biblical Old Testament God, the Yahweh, Jehovah, was actually some kind of malevolent entity, and that he instructed Noah to build an ark and have a few people and all those animals to survive in order to reset a previous civilization, because there were different kinds of genealogies from the Adam and Eve, from the initial two humans that were first created. There were different kind of lineages of people. One were benevolent, once were malevolent, and that Noah was like some kind of elite agent, like Agent Smith, that he was on the bad side and that he was hearing everything from the Demiurge, from the Jehovah, from the Yahweh, and that he was doing all the work that he ordered him to do, and that the flood was actually created by God. It was a natural phenomenon, but it was created by this malevolent God in order to reset civilization, reset humanity. But it isn't that the Gnostics were the first, because 2000 years previously to the Gnostics, so about 4000 years before current times, for instance, in the Epic of Atrahasis, there is a mention that people were really annoying to those gods, to Enlil, Enki, and all of those gods. And according to the Epic of Atrahasis, the cause of the flood was that the gods were annoyed with human beings, that they were too loud, there was too many of human beings, they weren't behaving as gods wanted them to behave, and that's why they created the flood in order to wipe out the humanity. But one god from that council of gods rebelled and told Atrahasis in his dream that he should dismantle his house and build a boat from this house. And Atrahasis was, what the hell I should do with that? It was a strange dream, but after a few nights he did that and he saved a little bit of humanity from the entire flood. And this interesting commonality in many myths, flood myths from the ancient times, because both in the Epic of Atrahasis, there's a mention that Atrahasis took onto his ark 7 people, 7 sages, 7 Apkallu. Noah, according to the Bible, took 3 of his sons, 3 wives of his sons, and his own wife. So again, Noah plus 7 people. And in one of the oldest version of the flood myth from India, in which there is the main character Manu also went on, built a boat and took onto it 7 sages, 7 rishis. So it is a commonality that the hero of the flood takes 7 other people onto his ark and saves humanity. And Gnostics were speculating that maybe there were some other survivors that weren't like submissive to this to this evil god, but they were rebellious and they hid somewhere. And Gnostics thought, of course some sects of Gnostics, because Gnostics is a very broad term, there are plenty of different communities of Gnostics, but some Gnostics groups believe that they were from those lineages of those good guys, of those people who weren't with the Noah and his ark, but from those who hid from the flood and also survived. And it wasn't only Noah that survived, and that the flood was a great reset of the previous civilization that wasn't cool for the gods or for one god, the Demiurge, the Jehovah, Yahweh, or anything. So the earth is a prison theory of Gnostics. They believe that our lower nature, like greed, hunger, lust, etc., is our lower nature, and this is the nature of the physical body, but we are not just physical bodies like the modern agenda wants us to believe, because then they can control us like puppets. Because if we believe that we are just not just biological machines, then we would behave accordingly. So if I say, oh, I have no free will according to modern science, probably, and I am just some subconscious things like lust, hunger, and all of those survival stuff, then they can control me, because they can say, oh, we should go into hedonism, and hedonism means, extracting as much pleasures and sensations from our lives as possible. And maybe you shouldn't have any higher idea, higher ambitions, because you're just biological machines. Then you should maximize your biological lower nature, animalistic nature. And Gnostics thought that if we have so many animalistic behaviors, those greed, lust, etc., then maybe the physical body is a kind of a prison for our souls. So this is the extremely negative conspiracy that we are here on earth, enslaved by some kind of higher entities who created the material body, just as in plenty of different world religions and spiritual belief, gods create humans out of clay, out of mud. So this is a metaphor for the physical body, because we came from the earth, because we are what we ate during our lifetimes and what our mothers ate, and food is mostly from earth, of course. So this was the metaphor, and it was both in the Mayan culture, in the Middle East, that we were created from clay, and this is the metaphor for this prison, which is our material body. And of course, the highest aspiration of humans would be to escape the matrix, escape the slave planet, and ascend and go from the lower nature. So suppress the lower nature, eliminate the lower nature and all of those animalistic behavior, and go ascend into higher power, because the Gnostics and many other philosophical groups and spiritual, that these were the conspiracy theories. But for instance, the Gnostics again weren't the first, and most probably Hermeticism. And Hermeticism was before and was the source of Gnosticism, because Gnosticism, according to modern scholars, is described as all of the groups from those ancient early Christian times that believe in the concept of gnosis. And gnosis is inner knowledge, spiritual knowledge, this insight knowledge. It isn't, oh, the knowledge that I read in books. No, it is a spiritual, inner, intuitive knowledge, the direct experience, like experience of divinity, like the mystical experience. If I experience something out of body, like out of body experience or mystical experience, it isn't the same as my knowledge of from the books, from information. So this was their gnosis. But actually, before Gnostics themselves, there was the Hermeticism, and we know that it was before, and most probably it was the originator of all the Gnostics movement, because the first mentions of Hermeticism, Hermes Trismegistus, which was the main god, the main person behind Hermeticism, was actually found from 2nd and 3rd centuries BC, and all the other Gnostics started in the 1st century of our current era. So the Hermeticism was before that, and Hermeticism was a little bit more optimistic than those extremely negative views that we are in a slave planet, that the gods are bad, etc. And according to Hermeticism, it was our own will of the soul that the gods, those negative entities, this Demiurge, this Yahweh, actually, according to Hermeticism, this Demiurge created the material world. He was ordered but by some higher entity, like the god, the creator. The Demiurge was ordered to actually create this reality, this material universe, our solar system, the material world. And he was ordered to actually, take care of it and manage it as it is being created and as it later is existing. So Demiurge was more neutral person, but Demiurge, because he saw human soul, because there was the main creator like the source, there was beneath that in the hierarchy the demiurge, but aside of that was human soul, which was completely different than the demiurge and was superior to the demiurge, because Hermeticism was mentioning the same as Christian Bible, that we are made in the image of God, that God gave the human soul the ability to create, because demiurge was ordered to create the material world and manage it, but he didn't have so much creativity and so much power to create. He was just, oh, here's the instructions, build a house, build the material world. So he was done that, and now you have the house, you have the material world, so now manage it in order not to get destroyed, etc. This was the demiurge, and demiurge was actually anxious about human beings, not beings, but human souls, that they are so superior to him, that they are creative and they are in the image of God. So what he did was he created the earth, the material world, of course, and then he created the human body. And the soul, the human soul, our own soul before our incarnation onto this planet, desired this body because it was so much pleasure. It was a form, as we mentioned in the Plato form, before any material form, there's an idea. So human soul was very superior, very spiritual, but it was only in the world of ideas. And now there was a form that could fit the human soul, and this form was so full of pleasures that, according to the Hermeticist, human soul desired this body, let's say incarnated into this body, and then because of the pleasures, it accumulated some kind of karma. And it's amazing that the Hermetic point of view, which was created in the Middle East, Egypt, and Greece of the ancient times, is similar to all of the concepts from the East about the reincarnation, about karma, because according to the Hermetic texts, for instance, the Corpus Hermeticum and all the minor texts that we find throughout the ages, it was some kind of karma that we incarnated into this material body and we were so desired of that. It was so pleasurable, it was so fun, it was so nice, but at the same time, because of those pleasures, we accumulated some karma, but in a sense that maybe we did something bad and we need to energetically, give away something good because of that. And that's why we are trapped onto this earth. But Hermeticists were saying it was our own idea, it was our own desire to do that. It wasn't that, our souls were got trapped into this body, that we are enslaved by those gods. We were not directly enslaved. We enslaved ourselves because of our material lower nature, and that's why the biggest thing in the Hermeticism is actually to go away from the lower nature of humanity, let go of that, and ascend to higher spirituality, which is the same as, for instance, in the Hindu thought. So this is amazing that it is almost the same. And then I think from that vision, the Gnostics had some more negative conspiracy theories, where like the pessimists, like we have, for instance, the Mayan calendar, famous 2012. But actually, there was just a mention that it is a shift of the ages, that one sun is finished and the other starts. And there is the beginning of the new era. And some people interpreted it very positively, like there would be an ascension event, that we would be some kind of spiritual beings because of this 2012, and other were extremely negative, that there would be a catastrophe, reset, etc. So this is the same with those theories about the earth is a prison.
Yeah, it seems to be all based on our perception, and I wonder if we could reach a collective perception that if we could come back to some of the consciousness abilities that our ancient ancestors used to have, and maybe we could live more harmoniously with the planet and use its energies for us instead of destroying it and making useless technology that doesn't benefit humanity.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think that this is the lost knowledge of the ancients, the knowledge that there are seasons, there are different kinds. Some people who are into spirituality would say there are different energies right now to do certain stuff and not do certain stuff. But I think we should accept, be humble that there are different seasons, different energies, and there are sometimes maybe different levels. Maybe in order to achieve something, some level or some desire that we want, we have to go through certain steps before. We cannot have everything immediately, and this is the nature of this reality. And I think that this is the biggest conspiracy theory from the last few thousand years that wants us to be cut off from our source, from our spirituality, and goes deeper and deeper into the material world, which is this demiurgic world, this satanic world, because I think that sometimes Satan and demiurge are the equivalents in some descriptions. I mentioned that this is the satanic pride of the rationalism, that we do not need to do what is right because we can logically think of something and choose something different because there are plenty of possibilities, so maybe I will choose that. It is a little bit arrogant to do that, and it is a satanic pride because in the metaphor, I think, of John Milton, of the Satan, of the Lucifer, it is often mentioned, this is of course an interpretation of the phenomenon of Satan or of the biggest negative entity. It is mentioned that the Satan or the Lucifer is a fallen angel, and he was so arrogant because he was the best of the angels, and one day he was so prideful that he is the best that he wanted to create the perfect world, the world that is more perfect than the God's world. And this is the idea of how our material world was created, and why in some traditions, even modern ones like the Satanic Bible of LaVey, there's an idea prevalent in our society that Satan is the king of this world, or the Satan is the king of matter. It is often mentioned like that, because I think that the material world is an attempt of Satan to mirror this ideal world. But we see from the Plato's ideas that this material world will never be enough, will never be perfect. And I think that the true world of the creator is this world of ideas. World of ideas, world of forms. Like our imagination, we can imagine perfect circle, perfect ball, but in this world it will never happen. So yeah, this matter may be actually a little bit satanic and may be connected to the demiurge, to the ideas of the Gnostics, but we have something more than that. And I think that's why the Satanism is prevalent. It isn't like some other kind of belief that is common nowadays, but it is Satanism, this reversing and this limiting. The first step was to limit by the use of dogmas like the Catholic Church or plenty of other religions, limiting our own spirituality. So let's limit by 20, 30 or 50%, but still give some hope, because people are too awake to tell them there is no spirituality. If I experienced some kind of mystical belief, I think no one could tell me that no, there is no spirituality. So this was the first step. At that time, people were too spiritual and they couldn't enslave us into thinking that there's only matter, no spirituality. But gradually, and with the science and with this overconfidence that we can explain all the things that happen naturally without any supernatural, it came gradually into the belief that there is only matter, we are just biological machines, and maybe we should just maximize our pleasures, which is again in reverse to what ancient mystical beliefs are telling us.
Right on. This is fantastic information, Aleksander. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with before we close out today?
Yes, I think that this was the final thought, that it is all connected to the Satanism, and it isn't just about the Satanism as another religion. It is about the whole ideas and whole concepts that they want to gradually more and more enslave us into materialism, and that we should actually not be into that view. And at the end, I want everyone to read my Deja Vu. Has everything already been in it? I explain the yugas, the cycles of time, and also repeating cases in our history, because our history repeated many times, so it may be the best physical evidence for reincarnation, karma, etc. And soon there will be my second book, Lost Knowledge of the Ancients, but it won't be only about what we've talked today. It will be also about plenty of other interesting ideas and advanced knowledge of the ancients that is forgotten now, but that it's very, very valuable. And I hope that everyone benefited from our today conversation. And I think that what I'm talking about, I'm only talking about. I don't want to be prideful or something, but I want only to share it because it connects everything and it is connected and it is compatible with plenty of different ideas, belief systems, and theories from both the metaphysics, spirituality, religions, and modern physics and modern material science. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Great information. And we'll definitely love to have you back when the new book comes out. We'll delve deeper into that information. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We will talk again tomorrow. We'll see y'all then.